Hey everyone, and welcome. Today we're diving into some truly revolutionary chemistry that could change how we think about pollution. We're talking about taking two of the biggest greenhouse gases, carbon dioxide and methane, and actually turning them into valuable products. Let's get into it.
So, here's the big question, right? For decades, the whole conversation has been about capturing these greenhouse gases and burying them somewhere. But what if we could use them instead? What if the pollution itself could become the raw material for things we need every day?
To even think about doing that, we first have to understand our two main players here. On one side, you've got carbon dioxide, CO2. It's rich in oxygen, super stable, and it's what you get when you burn fossil fuels. Then, on the other side, there's methane, CH4. It's packed with hydrogen, it's the main ingredient in natural gas, and, it's a much more powerful greenhouse gas than CO2 in the short run. In a lot of ways, they're chemical opposites.
And that brings us to the fundamental roadblock. Trying to force these two molecules to react with each other is what scientists call thermodynamically unfavorable. Or, to put it simply, it's like trying to push a ball uphill. It just doesn't want to happen on its own. It needs a huge amount of energy, which has made it pretty much useless for industry. Well, until now.
So how did they finally crack this puzzle? Scientists at Cheonnam National University in South Korea came up with this really clever new idea, something they call a sustainable carbon-consuming cycle. It's a genius way to trick these molecules into reacting by breaking the whole thing down into simple, separate steps.
The secret ingredient, the real magic here, is this special catalyst. And I love this analogy. We can think of it as a molecular chef. It's made of these tiny cobalt oxide nanoparticles. That's our chef, and they're wrapped in this porous silica shell, which is basically the kitchen. This design is brilliant because it can grab onto CO2 and methane molecules and hold them in just the right position to get them to react.
Okay, so with their molecular chef ready to cook, the researchers first tried to make a really common chemical, acetic acid. You probably know it as the main ingredient in vinegar, but it's also a massive industrial chemical used to make all sorts of things, like plastics and fabrics.
And here is the recipe they figured out. It's all about the sequence. First, they activate the CO2. They heat up the catalyst to 200 degrees Celsius and pump in CO2 gas, which kind of gets stuck onto the catalyst surface. Then, they activate the methane by cranking the heat up to 250 degrees and adding the methane. The two energized molecules combine, and voila, you get acetic acid.
Now this chart shows their success perfectly. Look at that clear volcano shape. The amount of acetic acid they produce just shoots up, hitting its absolute peak right at that specific temperature combo we just talked about, 200 degrees for CO2 and 250 for methane. If you change those temperatures just a little bit, you can see how the yield just plummets.
And listen to this. This wasn't just some small improvement. By figuring out this perfect two-step temperature process, the researchers boosted their acetic acid yield by more than 30 times. That is a massive leap. It's the kind of thing that takes an idea from a cool lab experiment to a potentially real industrial process.
But this is where the story takes a really fascinating, totally unexpected turn. The researchers got curious. They asked a really simple question. What if we just flip the recipe? What happens if we introduce the methane first?
And the answer was just incredible. By activating the methane first at 250 degrees and then adding the CO2 at 200 degrees, they didn't get acetic acid. Not at all. Instead, they made a completely different and arguably even more valuable chemical, methanol. And methanol is a huge deal. It's a foundational chemical for countless products, and it's even being looked at as a clean fuel.
And this slide just drives the point home. Just like we saw with acetic acid, the methanol yield has its own volcano plot. It peaks at the perfect temperature combination, but only when the gas order is reversed. This is the proof. It's a totally different chemical pathway, and all they did was change the order of the steps.
This quote from the paper really gets to the heart of what's so cool about this discovery. In this new, reversed recipe, CO2 isn't just another ingredient. It's actually acting as the oxygen supplier for the methane. It's literally donating one of its own oxygen atoms to create methanol. That's a brand new job for CO2 in this kind of chemistry. Okay, so you might be wondering, how can they be so sure that's what's happening on the surface of this tiny catalyst? Well, they used a special technique that's like taking a chemical fingerprint of the reaction, letting them see exactly what molecules are forming step by step.
This is what it looks like. It's called an FTIR spectrum, and you can really just think of it as a unique fingerprint for chemicals. Every peak on this chart corresponds to a specific molecule vibrating in a certain way.
By watching which peaks show up and which ones disappear, they could prove that in one recipe you get the stuff that makes acetic acid, and in the other you get the stuff that makes methanol. It's the smoking gun that proves their theory.
So, let's wrap up with the biggest takeaways from this incredible research. First, greenhouse gases don't have to be just waste. They can be valuable raw materials. Second, in chemistry, order matters a lot. Just changing the sequence of your steps can give you a completely different product. And finally, this opens up a whole new way of using CO2 as an oxygen donor in chemical reactions. You know, this whole breakthrough really shifts our perspective. It points to a future where factories don't just capture CO2 to bury it, but instead they pipe it right back into the system to create the next batch of products. It's like the ultimate form of recycling. And it leaves us with a really exciting question for the future of industry. What else can we turn from pollution into products? Thanks for joining me today.